Alright everyone, so tonight I wanted to do a video on engine obstruction. I see a lot of people talking about obstruction, not necessarily really understanding exactly how it works, so I just want to clear it up and demonstrate sort of how it functions. So basically, when you are moving an element, or placing it, you will see there is this orange cone coming out of it. So this works on brakes, wings, engines, pretty much anything that provides thrust on a ship, adjustors. Air brakes are the one exception right now. Currently, the obstruction cone doesn't matter on air brakes. I think they're going to implement it at some point, but they've been saying that for quite a long time and it hasn't happened yet, so take it with a grain of salt. But theoretically, at some point, that could happen as well. So basically, the way I like to think about it is you take this cone and sort of project it out into infinity. And that is the cone of obstruction on an engine. So you can only just see these little arrows here, but that sort of shows you like what direction needs to remain unobstructed. So if you wanted to, say, put an angled engine on here so that you could put it further up the ship, but so that it wouldn't be obstructing, you could do that like here. But you can see here that angle is still slightly angled inwards. So if I put this too far forward, even though it's to the right of all of the other engines, at this point I may end up getting a slight bit of obstruction. Now it's not much, and the obstruction percentages tend to be fairly forgiving. I'm not sure how exactly it's calculated. It's not a straight percentage. So like this one here, you'll see I've got it more than half covered. So I went to the halfway mark, and then I went one voxel more. And even still, it is only 29% obstructed. So you're still getting 71% efficiency out of that, even though it's almost, well, it's a little more than half blocked. This one, on the other hand, is completely blocked. So you see here, if I hit this, you see the cone is pointing straight into the face of this voxel work. Every single line is touching it. Nothing is clear. This one, almost half of them are clear. So that one gets 29% obstructed, but this one is 100% obstructed. This one I moved earlier, and it's still not obstructed at all, so it's sort of within that threshold where it's giving us some tolerance, so everything seems to be fine there for now. But yeah, basically that's sort of the way that you can get around it. If you want to have something that's not just a block on the back of your ship, it has to be angled a little bit outward. Because if I take this guy here and put him in the same spot, but angle him straight, now you see those cones are much more likely to collide with the ship. So I'll put him there, and the obstruction takes a minute to update, so I'll give him a minute to update, and I'll bet we'll see a small percentage of obstruction there. Probably not much, because there's still not a lot of the cone that's going to be hitting anything. It might even be clear entirely. I'll actually just adjust him over a little bit more so we can actually see it a little more clearly. But the most interesting thing about obstruction that even a lot of more experienced players aren't necessarily aware of is what matters is that cone hitting the outside of something. So that cone here, if I look at it, is hitting the outside of this voxel work. So that's what makes it obstruct. But if I actually take this voxel work here, this exact same voxel work, and extend it out into the cone, so that the cone is no longer visible, I might need to go a little bit further, because the cone is just a demonstration. It's not necessarily exactly precise. But no, you see, it's starting to drop off. So now it's only 41% obstructed. And this one's only 1% obstructed. And this one, actually, I could be running into an issue. Nope. Now this one is the only one that has any obstruction. So here, just like that, I just embedded it in the voxel work entirely, and even though it's completely covered, it is now 0% obstructed. So this is a way, if you want to have a design in your ship where you don't have a bunch of engines sticking off the back, you can pull this trick. Now it's worth noting that this only works because it is honeycomb. If you stuck an element back here, then then the line would be hitting that element, so you could still end up running into issues. And you can't get too fancy with the voxel work, because if you start like carving sections out of it or whatever, then you're basically adding extra faces that it could potentially obstruct with. So like if you put something in here where there's like a gap in it in some way, for whatever reason, now there is this outside of the voxel work that it's going to be hitting. So a chunk of that obstruction percentage is going to come back once it figures it out. So your mileage may vary. You're going to have to be careful with it, but you can end up doing some cool stuff with it. So like for instance, it's a bit of a mess right now, but my Anthea over here, I think this is the correct Anthea, I actually started sinking some elements into it. So you see here, this retro rocket brake, I can get at it from the bottom to repair it, but from the top, you can't see it. And it's fine. There's 0% obstruction on that brake. So I've got another one over here, same thing. And I think I've got some adjusters that are basically completely buried. I cut open a small hole for it just so you can see, so I can see it to repair it, because that one's buried in the voxel work. Yeah, so you can see there. That's the adjuster down below. And I've got some engines that I partially buried. Those ones aren't too bad. I think I've got some Atmo brakes that I buried in the same way. I don't even remember where those are. But I've got them buried in there such that if they do add the obstruction, they'll still be okay. I might have to get inside it to repair it, but that's okay. Yeah, so that's a way that you can sort of work around the obstruction thing. So I could have done something similar here. Like I could voxel work in the whole back of this, but I would have to be careful to make sure that they're all completely embedded in the voxel work, which does mean a lot of extra voxels. If you're working something light like carbon fiber or something though, that's not too much of a hassle. I had, back before the wipe, I had a Captain's Crown, which was a Captain's Custom ship that had a similar setup where the back engines, the Atmo engines, you couldn't see them at all. They're completely embedded in the voxel work. So it still had a big flat back, but they managed to work a little bit of voxel work design into it, so you weren't seeing all of those big X's on the back like you see on the back of every ship that can fly an Atmo. So it was kind of nice to kind of appreciate it as a cool stylistic choice. But yeah, so that's basically it. Wings work in a similar way. So here on this ship, you'll see I've got these wings at the front that are angled outward. So because they're at the front, that way there's not that much of their cone that's obstructed. And I think it's low enough that the wings are all technically considered completely unobstructed. Nope, not quite. So they're actually about 5% obstructed, because you can see a chunk of them is actually pointing at the ship. So yeah, they do have a very low obstruction percentage, but it was worth it for me to be able to put them at the front because I needed a lot of wings to be able to give this guy the lift that he needs. And I didn't want to put them all at the back because the back was already pretty full with the engines, because I built this guy entirely out of basic engines, so it would be relatively cheap to build. Yeah, that's sort of obstruction in a nutshell. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up. And if you got any other things you want videos about, also feel free to hit me up and I will try and cover it. Alright, thanks.